Greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, the sanctimoniously notorious RMB. And look who's here, everyone. It's Gilbert. Gilbert, the Burnettwork. Would you like to have a cookie? No, I have a cookie right here. You know you want a cookie. They just waited. They waited. I wasn't on yesterday. Tallulah gets her cookie. Here, Tallulah. You can't see her. You can see her tail. She's off screen. I thought, wow, you're pretty rambunctious today. You're pretty. Oh, see, Tallulah gets that one. You don't have to wait. No. Yeah, so Gilbert wanted to be here first and foremost. Look at him. He's just so rambunctious today. You're ready? You're just ready, buddy? You're ready for a cookie, huh? I got to give your sister a cookie because that wouldn't be fair. Okay, that's good. Now you guys got to get down. Now you got to get down. I know, Gilly. Get down. Down. Good boy. Good girl. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it is I, the sanctimoniously notorious RMB here. That was just a canine interlude for you guys, as it were. As you know, my doodles, I've got Tallulah is, of course, an Irish doodle. She's 50% Irish setter and 50% doodle. And Gilbert is a Burnettdoodle. He is 25% Bernese Mountain Dog and 75% Poodle. We are fond of calling Tallulah a country girl. She's a little unrefined. We got her from an Amish farm in Pennsylvania. That is a true story. And I'm convinced, if it's possible, that she's somewhere on the spectrum. Gilbert, however, clearly is royalty. Obviously, from a royal family, he is very regal. He is doing his best. It's kind of like, what is it, My Fair Lady or something? It's like Gilbert's Rex Harrison or something, and he's trying to refine Tallulah, who I don't know if you can take it's kind of like Daisy Duke meets George Sanders in All About Eve. I know I'm out in the weeds with these. They're just not good. Forget what I'm saying. Anyway, welcome to Robservations, the show about something. This is Robservations live chat number 199. My God, we move into 200s. Remember, though, I guess it's not the next century or the next, because 200 is the end of the 100s. So there was no like year zero. So it's 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30. That's how counting works. That's why Kubrick called 2001 and not A Space Odyssey, because 2000, as much as we might have reveled back in the day, it was not the new millennia. 2001 was. But, you know, they try to convince people this. Nobody pays any attention. I understand. Anyway, I want to welcome you to this, the 109th chat. It wouldn't be anything if it wasn't for you Imagination Connoisseurs from this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. I want to thank you all for being here, supporting this channel, both through participating, through your donations, through super chats, through all the kinds of things that we need to keep this going. And man, I'll tell you where you haven't been letting me down. Letters, people. I'm getting a deluge of letters across the transom. It's unbelievable. Let me just say, we're almost getting enough letters, which is great, that it's become, it didn't used to be unmanageable. I used to be able to get to most people's letters. Now it's getting unmanageable, which is good because we're getting so many people writing in. So if for some reason I don't get to your letter, don't take it personally. I'm trying to pick letters that are both cogently written, but also appeal to the widest amount of people, meaning you, the Imagination Connoisseurs out there. Or if somebody writes me a letter that is just a topic near and dear to my heart, you know, then I'll pick that. And, you know, don't try and butter me up. But anyway, I want to start this. I got to tell you about something that happened. So on Thursday night, Elizabeth and I went to the Hollywood Bowl. Now, the Hollywood Bowl is a concert venue. It's been around for a long time. It's world famous. It's a great venue. It's an outdoor amphitheater. It's a lot of fun. And on Thursday night, we went and saw a program called America in Space. And America in Space was incredible. It was a mix of classical pieces like Holtz's The Planets. They played, it was, first of all, the LA Philharmonic. David Newman was the composer, LA Philharmonic. And they began with Mars, the Bringer of War, and ended the program with Jupiter from Holtz's The Planets, which you can't be a science fiction fan and not have listened to The Planets over and over and over again. Not just because Various pieces have been used in movies, obviously, but it's just it was an amazing presentation. They played music from The Martian. Michael Giacchino was there. They played music from Interstellar. They played music from what else did they play music from? Apollo 13. Really, it was a great program celebrating America's achievements in space. And what was really astonishing is my very good friend Dan Schweiger, who plays himself in Free Enterprise. Dan married a very talented lady, very smart, talented lady named Penka Korneva. And Penka is from Bulgaria. And she composed and produced an album that Varese Sarabans put out called The Female Astronaut. Or the female astronaut, the woman astronaut, the female astronaut. And they played selections of her music at the Hollywood Bowl. It was actually her idea, and she made a presentation, and it was signed off on, and a lot of machinations occurred to have this program go up. And it was a really magical night. It was an amazing night. But if anyone follows me on Twitter, you will know something interesting happened. So where we were sitting, which we had fairly good seats, I love the Hollywood Bowl. Now, normally at the Hollywood Bowl, you go there hours early, you picnic. It's a really nice picnic venue, and they've got a lot of good food there. You bring your own food and wine. It's delightful. And then what you do is you have your picnic, and then when the program starts, you enjoy the program. Well, right after the program began, and this was a classical concert, there was a group of, I would say, like 20 people that sat behind us, and they talked incessantly through both parts of the program. They were making jokes. I mean, they were there not to really enjoy the music. I don't think they had a particular affinity for the music. I think it was something to do, or they were given tickets. Anyway, very rude. Many people told them to be quiet. Elizabeth told them to be quiet. And after the intermission and the concert started up again, same kind of behavior. And I finally turned, and I will say, I was extremely rude. I said, in my very best annoyed voice, I said, "Shut the fuck up." Flat out said it, "Shut the fuck up." And of course, it was immediately a answer with, "Ooh, aggressive much?" I mean, again, it was, I probably shouldn't have used the word fuck, but to endure it for a classical concert it's astonishing to me. Now, I've been going back and forth on Twitter with somebody today who says, classical concerts used to be raucous 100 years ago or 200 years ago. And I knew that about operas. I didn't necessarily know that about classical concerts. But the fact is, unlike, say, if you go to a Tiesto DJ set, or you're going to listen to some EDM music, like I was pointing out, that if you're listening to electronic dance music, it affects you physically as it's trying to get to your emotions. You're having a physical response to the beat, breakdown, that kind of thing, and it bolsters, makes you, when you dance, if that's what you like, and I like electronic dance music quite a bit, it starts out physical and it gets emotional. It brings you to that emotional high. Well, classical music I've always thought as working the exact opposite. It starts out being an emotional experience that provides a physiological response. Now, I could be wrong, but this is how I've always thought about it. I just believe in civility, and I believe in people not going to a classical concert and thinking they're in their bedrooms or their family rooms or talking to their friends on FaceTime or something. And it was really interesting. So after the concert was over, I wouldn't say that. I would say it's mid 20s to early 30s was the age range of the group. One of the guys was really angry with me and literally stepped up, wanted to fight, was really angry with me. And I was staring him straight back. And I'm like, really? Is that what you want to do? And I was ready to go because I've told people this story before, but when I was in Australia on Superman Returns, I was jumped by 4 guys and they beat the shit out of me. I wound up with 2 cracked ribs, a broken nose, face was cut open. I was concussed. It's pretty bad. But I stood up and, I held my own in the fight. It was 4-1 and they eventually ran off. But when you find yourself in that kind of a situation, you have to get up. You cannot stay on the ground. you cannot get clockwork oranged, or you can lose an eye. So once that's happened to you, barring somebody pulling a firearm, you never back down. You don't scream and yell. You just act very calm, and you look people straight in the eye. And if they're threatening you with physical violence, just bring it down and just look them straight in the eye and all right, that's what you want to do. And I was very calm, and his friends were holding him back. They were holding him back because they knew if it came into that situation, I was a lot bigger than him and probably substantially older. I would have, as they said in Star Trek VI, cleaned his chronometer, because he had his dander up. He was already angry about whatever. They were the ones that were rude. But ultimately, I'm telling this story because for those of you who listen to me a lot, I'm all about civility, and I'm all about, if you go to experience a concert, if you go out into the world, you cannot expect the world to conform to you. You have to deal with what the world has in store for you. And when you go to a concert, especially a classical concert that a friend of mine literally created, and her music was being performed. By the way, Penka, she became the first Bulgarian composer. She's Bulgarian national, to ever have her music performed at the Hollywood Bowl. It was a great night for a lot of people. And what you want is, when you're listening to classical music, to hear it. I don't want to hear rustling paper. I don't want you to open up your picnic after the concert has started. And it was just the civility, the lack of respect for both the audience and especially the performers was profound. Really pissed me off. And I apologize for using profanity, but they had been asked nicely repeatedly throughout the first hour of the performance before the intermission. And there's only so much people should have to take. So anyway, that was my experience. That was something I thought worth sharing. And it was, it was a nice night. The performances were fantastic. The piece from The Martian, I love The Martian so much, was amazing. I really love that piece. All of it was great. But to hear it all performed, there were vocalists, and there were different players, and then you had the full LA Philharmonic there. It was really a nice night. Except there was a bunch of douchebags that decided that whatever was going on in their lives, it's more important than the actual venue they're in, the people that paid to be there, and most importantly, the performers that are performing. I mean, my whole thought about all of this is, come on, man. You know what? If you come, can you shut up for 2 hours and allow the world, allow performers, allow composers, allow their work to wash over you? Is it really that important to joke about what's happening at work? Can you wait? Can you allow your life to feel something from outside of your normal sphere of influence? I mean, why were you there in the first place? I don't know. But normally I don't get angry, but it made me angry. I was very angry. And to have somebody who want to step up, and get in a fight because they were being rude and I called them on it, and I wasn't going to back down. If you really wanted to box in the Hollywood Bowl, okay, that's what you want to do. I mean, that's where you're going. That's what you want to do. That's your first response. And then they tried to make it how I was aggressively rude. No, I was pushed to my limits by people who were aggressively rude. And it was interesting because one guy did apologize. He said, "You know what? I'm sorry." But anyway, it was an interesting, definitely an interesting night. Great night of music. But, it's interesting. I do think that we live in a world where, I went to classical concerts growing up. My grandmother took me to see the Seattle Symphony, so I went to a lot of classical concerts, and you learn etiquette. You're sitting in a group of people. You're sitting in an auditorium, a whole theater full of people, an opera house full of people, whatever it is, and they've all come to listen to a performance. What they've not come to do is listen to you. So I've always assumed that when you go, same thing is true of a film. You have enough time in your life where you can talk to your friends, or When you sit down in a public arena and you are there, just give the people around you and give the performers, give them the respect they deserve. That's all I'm asking. I think, I don't need to tell you because you guys are all imagination connoisseurs watching me, but this is a personal anecdote I thought I would share as opposed to writing a letter. But anyway, really, it was very interesting, and how it's dangerous. It is dangerous to turn and tell people to shut up, because some people's first impulses are to get very angry. And at this point in my life, I don't suffer rude people. I believe in Hannibal Lecter when he said we should eat the rude. I mean, I don't want to eat the rude, but I understood where he was coming from. Hell is other people, right? Anyway, so congratulations to Penka for having her music played, and the female astronaut, or is the female astronaut? Let me find out if it's actually the female or the woman. I want to tell you, because you should all go. Yes, I think it is. Let me just make sure. Yes, it is the woman astronaut. It is the woman astronaut by Penka Koneva, and you can get it on Amazon. Verez Saraban puts it out. It's available on the audio CD. I highly recommend it. You know what else I highly recommend? Lucky Tiger, men's grooming products. For those men who want to look good and feel great, Lucky Tiger is still sponsoring my show. I want to thank them. And if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com and you punch in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity, when you check out, you will get 20% off your order. And also, they are running the Lucky Tiger tailgating giveaway. It's not a sweepstakes. It's a giveaway. And they're giving away over $500 worth of tailgating goodness just in time for the new football season. Go Seahawks. So join. You can go to getluckytiger.com or their sister website, clubluckytiger.com, and you can get potentially $500 worth of tailgating goodness, including a grill, a brand new grill. I can't join because it's obviously they sponsor me, but I would really like to own everything they're giving away, because you'll be the envy of all. That being said, I was looking into what I was going through all these letters, and there's so many interesting topics. I'm going to read a lot of letters today because there's a lot of letters to read, but there are so many interesting topics, and you guys are doing me proud. All of you imagination connoisseurs are doing me proud, sending in some really compelling topics. But, I just have James Bond on the brain. I mean, I've had James Bond on the brain for most of my life, but I keep thinking about Bond 25 and how all of us, you're all invited. I'm going to figure out how to work this out. But on potentially April 3rd in London, for anybody who can make it there, we're going to have a Robservation Nation meetup. And we're going to go see Bond 25 first show at the Odeon Cinema in Leicester Square in London. And by the way, what's really exciting about this is moderator Detective Jim Boyers. He is going to be there. And it's going to be the first time he's ever been out of the United States other than to the Caribbean, if he gets his passport. And remember, everybody should ask Jim Boyers every time he's in the chats. So, Jim, have you got your passport yet? I don't know, Jim, have you? We shall see. But anybody's invited. Anyone who wants to show up, it's going to be fun. I last went to London to the Odeon Cinema in Leicester Square to see Skyfall back in 2012 with my buddy Charlie de Lazarica, whose birthday it is today. So happy birthday, Charlie, one of the great DVD documentarians of all time. He did of course, the Blade Runner box set, made that incredible documentary, Dangerous Days. He also did all the documentaries on the Alien anthology disc. Those two discs alone are two of the great physical media discs of all time. Now, Gilbert, be a good boy, buddy, which are great. So happy birthday to Charlie. But I'm thinking a lot about James Bond. And where is Bond going? Like, is Bond still relevant? Of course, in GoldenEye in 1995, M called Bond a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a product of the Cold War. And is that still true? Does James Bond have anywhere to go in a world where we have the Fast and the Furious franchise, when we have the MCU, when we have Star Wars? Can James Bond still carve out a niche for himself? I don't know, but I'll tell you, Adam Blue, a writer a member of the Post-Geek Singularity community, who I just read a recent letter from, sent me a letter about Bond. And that's what made me want to talk about Bond with you guys. So I'm going to read his letter. Here's what he has to say. Rob, Adam Blue says, Rob, I haven't been that big of a James Bond fan lately, but growing up, I was obsessed. Because of my age, I mainly saw the Roger Moore films on TV. When GoldenEye came out in theaters, I then saw Bond in a whole new way. This is what got me to then really get into all the previous films and get familiar with the actors and the characters. After obsessively watching all of the films, my favorites have to be The Living Daylights, which we talked about earlier, and License to Kill. I think it's mainly because I love how Timothy Dalton portrays James Bond. He's tough but compassionate. And the years of Roger Moore's films ingrained in my mind really allowed me to appreciate the Bond world being a little more grounded. Also, The Living Daylights has a great score, which has its own style, similar to how GoldenEye had its own style. The Living Daylights was, of course, James Bond composer John Barry's last Bond score. From there, I saw all of the Pierce Brosnan films in the theater, but they slowly started losing their grounding in reality. I worked at a theater when The World Is Not Enough came out, and my manager gave me the movie poster, and I would listen to the soundtrack, which is great, to and from work. A great memory I love to revisit. I was familiar with Daniel Craig when he was cast in Casino Royale, but his acting type was not for me. While it is closer to Timothy Dalton, Dalton seems to possibly have more dramatic theater experience, which you can see through his acting. Daniel Craig is a great actor, but there's that bit of personal dramatic flair missing from his Bond. In the end, I love Casino Royale, and while the other films were watchable, they aren't doing anything to make Bond exciting. Maybe I blame Sony. They have a weird relationship with what they do with film. What should Bond do next? I may regret saying this, but I think Bond should take a cue, no pun intended, from Marvel films and make serious dramatic action while having upbeat character interactions. To be honest, I'm not a fan of all the Marvel movies because the tone just doesn't work for me. But when it does, it reminds me of how Bond could work today. Also, the idea of another person taking the 007 title is a great idea, especially if it is Lashana Lynch, as she seems very charismatic and can help attract new fans to the franchise. I do think George Lazenby and On Her Majesty's Secret Service was some sort of amazing Bond movie out of time. It's excellent in ways most of the movies haven't been able to replicate. And it's very interesting to have this singular Bond moment bookended by Connery and Moore's take. Actually, it's bookended by Connery and Connery's take, but I know what you mean because after Diamonds Are Forever came out, then Live and Let Die came out. Lastly, have you seen the Sherlock Holmes 1984 TV series? It's absolutely fantastic and is led by Jeremy Brett, an amazing actor who was considered the part of Bond early on, but his sexual preference made it too taboo. What a shame. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about Bond a bit since you seem just as into the franchise as I am. Thanks for reading, Adam B. Well, you know what, Adam B? First of all, thank you. I love an opportunity to talk Bond whenever I can. And I do. I mean, I've enjoyed the franchise since I was a kid, and we've talked a lot about the franchise on the show and what I think about it and how much I've loved it in the past. But what I think is really interesting is this idea of where do you take James Bond now? Where do you take James Bond now? Is James Bond a character that was born out of Ian Fleming's imagination in basically the 50s during the beginnings of the Cold War, post-World War II? And Bond is a character that was created very specifically to be part of a certain part of geopolitical landscaping, the geopolitical landscape that existed at the time. Now, because the character is lucrative and we've seen James Bond movies since 1962, why not keep him around? I mean, we're now 57 years into the Bond franchise. Next year, it'll be the 58th year of James Bond cinema, and we are going to be getting the 25th official Bond movie. The question is Bond still relevant today? Obviously, the players on the world stage are very different. Russia seems more of a nuisance because of their own ineptitude than they do by having mutually assured destruction with the United States. I mean, if in fact that they're a hypersonic missile that is powered by a nuclear reactor, apparently that missile blew up in a test. It killed 5. Norway is now reporting they can see radiation. I mean, they have a missile that works throughout the thrust is generated through a nuclear reaction, which means it's literally a dirty bomb flying through the sky until it hits its intended target. And since it is powered by a nuclear reactor, that means wherever it hits, it is a dirty bomb and irradiates just like any other nuclear device. And it just seems to me, well, that's pretty ill-advised, I would think. And that's like the plot of a Bond movie. The Russians are building a hypersonic cruise missile that is, we can't defend against it, that's powered by a nuclear reactor. So it's literally belching wherever it flies. It can apparently fly around the world for days if it works. This missile can fly around the world for days until it's actually dispensed to its target. Terrifying. But apparently they're having problems getting it to work because, hey, it blew up, irradiated the general vicinity, killed 5 people, and God knows what we're not going to know about until Craig Mazin writes another Chernobyl TV series for HBO. But anyway, the idea of James Bond, we've seen other people, whether it's the XXX franchise with Vin Diesel, whether it's, I guess, the Fast and Furious franchise has become sort of the new globe-trotting Bond franchise. And then, of course, the Jason Bourne movies. Now we're getting Treadstone, the Jason Bourne TV series. Even Jack Ryan, CIA analyst that he is, has become, at least the new Amazon series too, has sort of supplanted Hunt for Red October, the Tom Clancy movie, was kind of like a Bond film. If it wasn't Jack Ryan, it could have been James Bond. I mean, you could have slipped Bond right in. But does the Bond franchise have a place in our day and age today? I don't know. Can one man bring governments down? It just seems like, before we had very clear-cut ideas of who was good and who was bad, and we believed that. I mean, I still think there's a part of me that still thinks that the one government in the world that and this is going to seem inane to anybody who lives in the UK, but I honestly believe, and it is instilled in me from an early age, that MI6 is actually like the one intelligence organization left in the world that has integrity. I know it's silly. People are like, "Are you kidding?" My UK viewers like, "What, Burnett? What are you talking about?" Look, I get it, but as the world has become gray, and governments that we thought were heroic, everyone is living in a compromised world now, a counterfeit world, as they called the documentary for To Live and Die in LA. There's a total weird non sequitur, but it's a very interesting world we live in. The good guys are not. No, I don't think there's no such thing as truly good or truly evil anymore. Everyone is just deeper shades of gray as the years go by. Very interesting. And I'd like to think, like, if I was in charge of a James Bond movie, the idea is ultimately James Bond goes on a mission. He's supposed to stop someone. What we need to do is we need to bring back, Bond has become too grounded, I think. I think that there is a larger than life nature to James Bond. Even the fact everything, he knows what the perfect champagne is and how it should be chilled and what his favorite caviar is and all of those things. There's a larger than life aspect to the James Bond character, especially as he's portrayed on screen. He's a great lover. He's a great intellect. He knows how to defuse a nuclear bomb. He's very larger than life. He is, in a way, sort of a superhero. And in that way, I can see what Adam Blue is saying about making the Bond films more like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Totally get it. Totally understand where you'd be coming from. But I think what we need to do is they've tried to humanize the Daniel Craig Bonds. Casino Royale, I thought, was great. It really, at first I didn't know what to make of it, but as I watched it more and more, I really came to love the film. I thought it struck the perfect balance. The fact that it spends a long time on a card game, just like the novel does, but it worked. I mean, it really worked. It was riding that crest of the popularity of the World Series of Poker and all those things. I thought it really worked. But The next three films, and I'm a Quantum of Solace apologist, but especially Skyfall and Spectre, they're not fun. They're not fun movies. James Bond isn't having fun. He really doesn't want to be where he is. And if James Bond isn't having fun, if James Bond doesn't like being James Bond, then, and I understand they're trying to give him pathos and they're trying to give him more depth. But the fact is, the James Bond franchise must begin and end with James Bond having a good time. Bond is always loving being James Bond. And I think that was something as we move into the modern age and we can't have heroes the way we used to. Everything has to have shades of gray. We can't have any reverence. It's why people talk in classical music concerts. It's the same reason, because there's an earnestness to James Bond and an earnestness, to these characters. And even though, Bond sleeps around and he does a lot of questionable things in the pursuit of justice, he does have a license to kill and will do so to get the job done. The time of James Bond might be different, but I think in a way we need James Bond now more than ever. We need somebody who's above and beyond identity politics and our petty squabbles. It's like, this person is going to destroy the world, and I'm going to stop this from happening. You can bitch and moan and complain all you want. You can talk about your politics. You can talk about what I should or shouldn't do, and if I should be nice, and if I should respect this person. But Bond is of the opinion that none of that matters. It's either we're going to survive, or Carl Stromberg or Hugo Drax is going to eliminate all life on this planet. And all of what we're talking about is immaterial if you're not here to talk anymore, because you've either been destroyed in nuclear fire or an orchid from the Amazons. It's going to kill you. You're going to be dead. And I think in a way, we need James Bond more than ever. We need somebody whose goals are clear cut, and we as an audience know exactly what needs to be done to complete. The reason he has a license to kill is to cut through the BS. He's going to do what he needs to do to save us all. And whether that is immoral and whether that is questionable, his methods, like, why should he kill? Does he have to kill? Yes, he has to kill. Because in the world of James Bond, you either kill or the world is destroyed. And when those stakes, those are very definitive stakes. And I like that. Even as a kid growing up, I understood, you know what? That's why Bond has a license to kill. I don't even know if that's a real thing, to be honest. In all this time, I've wondered, does MI6, do they really issue license to killing licenses to people? I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. All I can say is I want to see more of old school Bond come back. I think we need more people to kind of like the people at that classical concert. We need to shut the world up. Enough of the talking and the bickering. We need to start taking action across the board. If there was climate change, James Bond would be like, let's fix it. We'll talk about it later. But as you guys are bickering and trying to prove your points, the sea level is rising. The glaciers or the ice that's on land. Apparently, by the way, do you know that the sea level on the planet raised 0.5 millimeter this week with just the water that was running off of Greenland? 0.5 millimeter. Whether you believe that or not, I mean, at least let's just say, let me quantify that and say that's what I read. 0.5 millimeter. Because here's how much water they anticipate left. And now we're talking about, did I say New Zealand? Greenland. It was Greenland. If I said New Zealand, it's Greenland. In Greenland, water that was on the surface, not icebergs, because displacement takes care of itself. This was water that was not in the ocean already. Billions of gallons were dumped into the ocean, raising our sea level this week 0.5 millimeter. Why that is? Hey, I would say it's because the planet has been getting hotter. And we're going to be in a world of hurt, whether you believe it or not. And that's why we need men like James Bond. And I think there's always a place for him. I want to see James Bond in James Bond movies where he cuts through all of the cacophony of idiocy and punditry and all that. And he has his license to kill. And if someone is in his way, he takes them out to get the job done. I like that. Obviously, we don't live in that world, but I'd like to believe that we need people like that to implement policy. I know it's terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. I shouldn't be saying that, right? Somebody's going to get mad. CJ Dunn is firing all kinds of super chats in at me today. CJ Dunn says, "Sup, my man? Missed you yesterday. Hope everything went well." It did. For those of you who don't know, I was working on a project for a major streaming service that you'll be seeing deep into next year. It was something I'd never done before. Very interesting. Very impressed with what it was. And hope you guys will enjoy it when you see it. Very interesting. CJ Dunn also says, Willow Yang, hashtag Princess PGS, hashtag our beloved shy. Our shy, what is that? A princess? Hashtag bring the Willow, hashtag bend the knee, hashtag all hail the Yang. Yeah, but as you know, we gotta back off. We gotta let Willow be Willow. We can't put that kind of pressure on her. CJ Dunn also says, started watching Woo Assassins recently, and who do I come across? None other than Mark Dacascos from the greatest movie ever made, Double Dragon. Look, we're in the middle of we have the reconnaissance, now we're having the Costascence, the Mark Dacascos, because Mark Dacascos Dacascos was in John Wick 3, and now he's in Woo Assassins. Mark Dacascos is having his Dacascosance, and it is fantastic. Bring on Mark Dacascos. It's great. Stub McShave says, although gadgets always were a part of Bond, they have become commonplace now. I think Bond movies should... Hey, yo. Boy, these dogs. It's just Julia. Elizabeth's friend Julia is here. It's okay, buddy. Hey. Craziness. I think Bond movies should focus more on character interactions instead. Well, here's the thing. Remember, Bond movies used to focus on character interactions. That was the big deal. Like Bond playing golf with Auric Goldfinger. He played golf. That was one of the big set pieces in Goldfinger is Bond was playing golf and Auric Goldfinger cheated at golf. What's very funny, we live in a world where Donald Trump is president, but if there was ever a Bond villain that was like Trump, it would be Auric Goldfinger. You'd go to Mar-a-Lago and you'd play golf, and I'm not saying Trump is a cheater at golf, but Auric Goldfinger, as we find out, owns the club. And before, I'm not saying that Goldfinger is at all analogous to the Trump presidency or anything like that, but just because Trump owns a golf course, more than one, and Goldfinger owned the golf course, it's kind of interesting. But yes, I think character interplay is what made Bond movies great. I've always said the interplay between Bond and the villains were the highlights of the movie, usually. And when you had a strong or charismatic villain and Bond would go mano-a-mano, usually through some kind of intellectual exercise, those were always my favorite things. The character interaction was best. Willow Yang, working her way through the second season of Star Trek The Next Generation, says, the Next Generation's unnatural selection has me so confused. I thought eugenics was banned in the Federation, and apparently transporters give you immortality. Well, Willow, all I can say is welcome to an old school Star Trek fan's conundrum when watching The Next Generation. Did you throw bricks at the screen, or did you sit back and try and figure it all out and rationalize it to yourself? It was hard. I will admit the first two seasons of Next Generation are rough. Unnatural selection is, not one of their finest moments, I have to say. Not even the makeup effects are very good in that episode. CJ Dunn, wow. Dacascos, sorry for the butchery. I have found another Asian crush. Lim Jin Lil, sorry, Willow Yang. I still bend the knee to you. Our beloved shy NES princess. NES? PGS? Shouldn't it be PGS? NES? Or NES? Is that NES like game system? Anyway, yes, everyone loves Willow. Lee Jun Lee. Oh my God, autocorrect. Yes, Yes, Lee Jun Lee. Now, has Lee Jun Lee? Somebody was just cast in the Mortal Kombat movie. I wasn't paying much attention. I don't know if that's the case. But CJ, by the way, thank you for all the support on the channel today. That was very good of you. Very nice of you to do that. But I got a lot of other different letters. Really interesting stuff. Now, you know what? People are going to say, I'm just reading this because Jim wrote it. But there is a great letter from Jim Boyers, Detective Jim. And I really like this letter. And I'll tell you why, because this letter sort of hits close to home for me. I don't do this anymore, but there have been times, well, that's not true, but there have been times in the past when I'll just flat out lie about having seen a movie. I've read enough about it. I know enough about it that I know what it's about and things like that. And I know enough. I can bullshit my way. I don't think it's a good thing, but I have done it. But this is Jim has written a great letter. Rob, most people are good at seeing a TV show or movie, not liking it, and letting people know that fact. My question is, what, if any, are the TV shows or movies that someone claims to have seen or just remains silent about not seeing because it is too embarrassing for them to admit? Maybe because the movie or franchise is a cultural phenomenon that everyone else seems to be a part of. Or maybe because their friends are talking about it and they feel odd that they have nothing to contribute. I will give you mine. I have never seen the movie Avatar. Yes, until recently, the #1 film of all time in the geek culture's gone with the wind. I've spent the last 10 years staying out of conversations about it, and no one knows I haven't seen it except my wife. I had no interest in seeing it when it came out. The visuals and the trailers didn't appeal to me for whatever reason, so I didn't have it anywhere on my to-see list. When it came out on DVD, I rented it and attempted to watch it. I fell asleep halfway through it and returned to it, never having watched the rest. Returned it, never having watched the rest. It just didn't hold my attention. I wish I could explain it. I wish I could have liked it or would have liked it. Maybe if I watched it now, it would be different. That has certainly happened before, where I've not liked a movie, watched it years later and did, so there is always hope. I just have to get off my butt and do it. Maybe I will right before Avatar 2 comes out. Actually, that would be a whole other topic. What movies have you hated the first time but loved years later and vice versa? Well, I will leave the discussion up to you and take my lumps in the chat, as I'm sure I will. I mean, who hasn't seen Avatar, for crying out loud? What kind of self-respecting geek does, or in this case, doesn't do that? Jim B. Well, Jim, I think, look, all of us, man. We are all of us, girls, boys. I don't care who you are, what gender you are, what your sexuality is, what religious beliefs you have. All of us have either lied about not seeing a movie at one point or are slightly embarrassed that we haven't seen some kind of a major cultural touchstone. It's just a fact of life. And for Jim, for you to come out and admit this, you're a bigger man than many of us other members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. So kudos for you, or kudos to you for being honest. But I would say this. You know, the experience of Avatar is one of those movies where I'm a big advocate of seeing films on the big screen. Tomorrow, by the way, if you live near an IMAX theater, it's a good bet you can still see Apocalypse Now, the final cut, in a theater. And if you've never seen Apocalypse Now, I guarantee you seeing it in a theater will change your experience. It'll also probably change your life and your perspective on movies to a certain extent. I don't want to oversell it, but it will, especially seeing it on a big screen with the sound the way it is. It's a staggering achievement, and it's unlike any movies you've seen today. There's not one bit of CGI in it. It's a fantastic film. But anyway, and I'm sure there's a lot of you who have never seen Apocalypse Now watching this chat right now. Try and rectify that tomorrow at the IMAX theater nearest you. But I think what Jim's saying is right. But in terms of Avatar, Avatar is truly a movie that I think works best if you see it in IMAX in 3D. I think it's a staggering accomplishment. It's the best 3D that's ever been done ever. And seeing it in IMAX 3D, it's an astonishing movie. And like so many modern science fiction films, like, look, was talking about this the other day. I just recently rewatched Alita Battle Angel, which I actually quite enjoyed. But all of the film is all familiar, even though it came out last year. So many different movies, especially since the manga came out over 25 years ago, have mined that material. So none of it really feels fresh. It's all variations on a theme that have been mined, whether, you're watching everything from Ex Machina to Battlestar Galactica to even Blade Runner, even though Blade Runner predates the manga. I really liked Battle Angel, Alita Battle Angel, but even the rollerball game, the murder ball or a motor ball, whatever it's called in the movie, again, we've seen all of that. It's been done, but seeing it in a film seeing it in a theater in 3D, I thought the experience was great. But watching it at home, Elizabeth had never seen it. We enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing it a second time, but it's certainly a reference disc. It looks incredible, but everything in there, I kept thinking that the city that this takes place in is an amalgamation of the city from The Fifth Element or the city from Blade Runner or a number of different science fiction films. So many science fiction films have been now influenced by manga and Japanese design and Blade Runner and dystopian images that we've already seen. It's hard to make a movie that has a visual palette, a science fiction film that has a visual palette that's new. I think Avatar did that. And I think it works really well. Now, when you watch it now, I adore Avatar. I love the film. I think it's great populist filmmaking. Do I think it's the greatest movie in the world? No, but for what it is, it knows exactly what it wants to be, and it's the best. If you're going to get a fast food sci-fi epic, it's the best fast food sci-fi epic, I think, one of the best that's ever been made. I think it's a staggering achievement, but it's way better if you see it in IMAX and see it in 3D, the way it was made, the way it was intended to be seen. But it's okay. I think it's okay. I have never seen Sound of Music, as I've told everyone, even though I own it. It's just one of those movies that like, I know what it's about. And I was trying to show Elizabeth, I couldn't believe she'd never seen West Side Story. And she's like, well, you haven't seen The Sound of Music. Okay. But Sound of Music was just one of those movies that never appealed to me. There's no, intellectually, I know what it's about. It's got Nazis in it. I'll watch anything with Nazis, but I understand. I get it. It's just one of those movies I never saw. But as far as what Jim was also asking, what's a movie I saw in the theater that I hated? I've said this before, The Talented Mr. Ripley. Anthony Minghella's follow-up to English Patient. He made Talented Mr. Ripley, and then he also made Cold Mountain. I hated Talented Mr. Ripley when I saw it. Hated it. I really did. However, when I maybe because I was hungover, I had a headache, I don't know, but upon further reflection, I adore that movie. I've done a complete 180-degree absolute turnaround on The Talented Mr. Ripley. I love the film. I love everyone's performances. I love Jude Law and Matt Damon. I love the first hour when they're in Italy having a good time and just partying. I love it. First 45 minutes, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. I love it. It's so great. I love the film. Philip Seymour Hoffman is so great in it. Everybody is great in that film. Cate Blanchett, Gwyneth Paltrow. It's just love the film. I did not like it at all when I first saw it, mainly because it wasn't the kind of movie that I was expecting. I was expecting more of a straightforward, Basic Instinct type thriller, and I was rejecting what I was seeing in my own mind when I first saw it. But that's a movie that I dearly adore. But as I've gotten older, there's lots of movies that I like more as I've gotten older. Things that you just kind of settle into and understand what they are. But yeah, so that's don't feel bad, Jim. Nobody should feel bad because they have a hole in their pop culture knowledge. The great thing about it is you can go rent a movie and see it. But I will say this, I'm not big when I was growing up, when I was reading fantasy novels, like I read Tolkien. I'd read The Hobbit, and then I started in Lord of the Rings, and I read like Sword of Shannara and the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant that I like more. I like the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, but fantasy is not my thing. I just, in general, as a genre, I love the Lord of the Rings movies and all that, but reading fantasy, it's not my first choice. only because I think I have an aversion to the fact that so much of fantasy isn't real, where science fiction could be real. You know, it's more firmly set in the real world. So I have an aversion, I think, to fantasy as a genre. I mean, to me, the Harry Potter movies, the first Harry Potter movie, the Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, it was a movie about magic to me that wasn't magical. And I watched the first Harry Potter. I thought it looked good. I loved the casting. I just didn't like the movie at all. I thought their slavish devotion to the text made the film strangely inert. Now, I know people are like, what? But remember, I wasn't young enough to have some attachment to those books. But I haven't even seen the last two, the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2. Haven't ever seen them, believe it or not. Because they were all kind of the same to me. But that's my big blind spot's fantasy. Whereas I love Lord of the Rings because it's a men on a mission movie. And I'm all about that. And again, I loved Game of Thrones because it was more politics and but yeah, that's my blind spot comes when it comes to there's some fantasy and there's some comedy that I am woefully lacking in knowledge about. So I think everybody has their blind spots. And that doesn't matter. You should never be embarrassed. But what's great is we live in a world where you can go sample it and go get it. And I think it's always best to learn things. It's always best to broaden your horizons than it is to not broaden your horizons. So, Jim, I would say, you know what? Wait. Now that you know that there's an Avatar sequel coming out, I'm sure Avatar will come back to theaters and you will be able to see it in IMAX 3D. That's the best place, the best way to see Avatar. Wait to see it that way. Or if you are going to watch it on home video, I have to recommend the extended cut that exists. Check out the extended cut because it's pretty good. Tiberius Monk 84 is here. I'm off to an 80s club party, but I want to say R&B, you have one of the best YouTube channels this decade. Keep up the great work and Excelsior. Well, Tiberius Monk 84, thank you very much for saying that. I really appreciate that. But I guess I only have 2 more years before the decade's until 2021 before the decade's over. Crazy. But I want to thank you for that. I appreciate that. You know, I've been getting a lot of very nice letters and things that people have said about this channel. And first of all, I thank you for that. But you have to remember, I'm just reflecting back at you what you guys already are. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have the Post-Geek Singularity community to do it with. And I think that I just am filling a void. I'm trying to bring delightfulness to all of your lives. Like let's celebrate all of this great stuff and be happy about it. Now, that doesn't mean we're not critical. But ultimately, look, when I'm criticizing Star Trek Discovery, everybody knows I still love Star Trek. We still have 53 years of Star Trek behind us that we can love. One iteration of Star Trek doesn't mean I don't love Star Trek. But I think it's important, you know, that all of this is supposed to be. There's a great video that I watched yesterday, and it was somebody who was very critical about the Fandom Menace channels, like Geeks and Gamers and Ethan Von Sciver and all of these things. And now I've watched those guys and girls, members of the Phantom Menace. People would say that Doomcock and even Gary Beekler and people like that are part of this Fandom Menace group. But even though I watch everybody, but it was really interesting. It was specifically focusing on their hatred of Star Wars, where Star Wars is, Disney Star Wars. It's a very funny video. But somebody wrote me back. I broke up the first episode of Robservations and put up Greg Smith, our moderator, one of our moderators. I have 3 videos. I'm going to drop another one today. I did 2, where he shows his cosplay skills off. And a lot of people wrote me after that, and people put comments on the YouTube page and have thanked me for celebrating this stuff. And I'm actually going to do, I'm going to do an original, it's going to be the first of Robservations fully articulated. I mean, I did one before, but I'm going to start a regular feature maybe once a week where I'm going to start doing a fully articulated video where it's not going to be a live video, but I'm going to do a fully articulated video just about random stuff I love in the genre space. And the first fully articulated video that I'm going to do is going to be about the Eagle Transporter from Space 1999. The Eagle Transporter, for those who watched the first 2 seasons of Space 1999, is a ubiquitous vehicle that is used by Moonbase Alpha. And when you were a kid, if you were a kid in the 70s, the Eagle Transporter is one of the coolest spaceships ever. And it also has a real world feel to it. It's kind of got this insectoid look, but this real world feel. And it was, of course, coming out of the mind of Jerry Anderson and Brian Johnson and Derek Meddings and all the people that made all the cool Jerry Anderson vehicles when you're a kid, whether it was Thunderbirds or UFO. But the Eagle, there's something about the Eagle Transporter that really captures the imagination. And I've been buying and owning Eagle Transporters since I was a kid. And the Eagle Transporter has undergone a renaissance in recent years. Obviously, MPC Round 2, they've been reissuing Eagle model kits. 1612, the company out of the UK that used to be Product Enterprises that 10, 15 years ago was making die-cast Eagles, have gotten back in to the Eagle business. They've made 44-inch Eagles that have sold out, and they are currently releasing sets of 1/72nd scale Eagles, die-cast sets from various episodes of Space 1999. And of course, how can you not collect those? They're even going to do an Earthbound episode Eagle pack that comes with the Eagle and then Christopher Lee's ship from the first season episode, Earthbound. So I'm going to do a video about the Eagle Transporter, and yeah, you're gonna watch that, and because it's great, it's going to be great. I'm going to make it great. But people have said to me that one of the things that I'm all about is positivity. So I want to thank you, Tiberius Monk. But again, we're supposed to be having fun. If we're not having fun, and we're like, I don't want to spend my life. I spend enough of my life bitching about Star Trek. But I mean, I like Star Wars. I love Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. The first 2 Star Wars movies literally changed my life. But beyond that, after I saw Return of the Jedi in '83, I did not have as much of a connection to Star Wars. I still love the ships. I still love the characters. You know, I still have lots of action figures. I still collect 12-inch figures of Star Wars. I mean, I still love Star Wars, but I don't have this deep connection to it like I used to because Jedi let me down. But no, it's fine. But I still love the franchise as a whole. But it's really interesting to watch. Like, why are we bitching and moaning about all this kind of stuff? There's so much great stuff. I mean, I look down. There are 2 things that I've been using in work. Like this disc that La La Land Records put out it's a Star Trek 50th anniversary CD set. It has all the music for the animated series. Who would have thought? It took 50 years to get it. And then, of course, the same company, La La Land Records, put this Superman the movie score out for the film's 50th anniversary last year. I mean, I've shown these things before because I have them sitting right here on my computer desk. But we live in amazing times. Like if you're a fan, if you're a geek, whatever you love, we live in amazing times. So why not have a YouTube channel that just celebrates all of it? I mean, that's what Robservations ultimately is all about. You know, I talk about stuff, yes, but ultimately it's basically this channel is about the greatness of being alive and how awesome it is to be a fan. So Tiberius Monk, thanks for bringing that up, and thanks for the compliment. Jim Brown is here. Jim Brown. By the way, first of all, thank you, sir, for the super chat. In the Star Trek Picard trailer, there's a quick night scene after Picard looks up the sky. It contains a sky full of stars at night, but something else too, and no one seems to know what it is. Do you? Well, Jim, what an intriguing question, first of all. You know, I don't know if anyone's brought this up. I am not sure. A quick night scene, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but if that is in fact the case, now I want to go back and watch the Picard trailer and see what it is. I would imagine if you can see it from the ground, the obvious thing would be it's the Enterprise, but I don't think it is. I bet it's the Borg cube. We see that there's a Borg cube being excavated by, I guess, the Romulans. I don't quite know or the Borg expats working with Romulans. Maybe it's the Borg cube. Maybe it's the Enterprise. I would assume if that's true, if there is a ship there, we've seen a Borg cube in the trailer. So I would assume that would be it. That would be my first guess, but it's intriguing. Look, you know what? I'm crossing my fingers for Picard. I'm excited about it. We've talked about it. I want it to be good. I have no faith that it will be, but it's going to be a litmus test to me for how Star Trek is moving forward. Like, everyone is talking about, oh my God, Viacom and CBS are coming back together. Well, Viacom and CBS were always together when the Star Trek that was always interesting to me was being made. So to me, it's just going back to the way it was before Star Trek has had the long, dark night of the soul that's gone on for the last 10 years. So I'm looking forward to seeing where they take Picard. I mean, I look at it this way. I don't think I can hate anything as far as media goes as much as I hate Star Trek Discovery. In my life, in my entire life, there's been no media, there's been no franchise, there's been no movie, there's been nothing that has been a continual source of profound disappointment to me on every single level more than Star Trek Discovery was. So I am looking forward to Star Trek Picard because I don't think that there's any possible way it could be worse for me. So I think the Picard series, at least, even if it's 10% better than Discovery, that would be, I would be like, thank the maker. Thank you so much for that. So I'm looking forward to it. So we'll see. I guess we're going to find out. I hope it's good. I really do. Chris Parsons is here. Chris Parsons says, First Contact was meant to be a faster-paced movie. It had zombie vampires, the Borg, that could have been on the Enterprise to take it over, and had a landing party on Earth to stop the shuttle launch, or stop the launch of the Phoenix. Was it meant to be a faster-paced movie? I mean, I think one of the interesting things about First Contact that I actually love, I have problems with First Contact. I mean, look, I understand it. It's got the Borg in it. It's action-packed. People like it for that reason. I get it. I understand that. To me, it's a retread. The Borg were far more interesting in the Next Generation series than they are in First Contact. And I understand. I love Alex Crea. She's great. Loved her in Ghost Story the first time I recognized seeing her. But I just think that the movie is not what it could have been. But it's I understand it's clearly the best Next Generation movie. But I love the scene on the deflector dish of the Enterprise, which is not the most fast-paced scene in the world, but it was so cool seeing something innovative done that we hadn't seen before in Star Trek. When they're fighting the Borg on the exterior of the Enterprise. I love that. I thought it was great. But yeah, I mean, it could have been a faster-paced movie. I thought, look, Jonathan Frakes, his first feature directorial assignment, pretty damn good, though. Pretty damn good. Tiberius Monk 84 says, 50 Shades of Grey I saw in theaters and hated it. Yeah, 50 Shades of Grey is a weird thing. I've not seen those movies. I mean, I kind of want to see them. But to me, 50 Shades of Grey is basically 9.5 weeks if the relationship worked out. And to me, 9.5 weeks is so good. I love 9.5 weeks. And by the way, not a perfect movie. But man, Mickey Rourke in that film. Ugh, Kim Basinger. Adrian Lyne. Oh, man, I love 9.5 weeks. I love it so. So, but I get where you're coming from. I do. But 50 Shades of Grey, it didn't, even the trailers to me had no verisimilitude. I don't know if that's true, but it just never felt right to me. I don't know. Stubble McShave says, sci-fi makes the probable possible. Fantasy makes the impossible probable. I think that's pretty good. I mean, to me, one of the great things about storytelling is if it relates somehow back to human beings. I think all the great stories are about conveying messages to us. And while I love fantasy, I mean, I get it. I do understand. But to me, it's hard to make. That's why the Game of Thrones characters, even though it took place in a fantasy world with dragons and magic, it's really about politics, and that's what I loved. And I think that's why I really disliked the 8th season, or actually the final 4 episodes of Game of Thrones so much. was that all the political machinations sort of went away. And, I wanted to believe, I think the thing, like, for not to bash on Game of Thrones, because I think it's a staggering achievement overall, but, the Night King, I wanted to know why. Clearly there was intelligence behind what they were doing. It wasn't like they were just mindless hordes of zombies. I mean, the Night King had a reason for doing what he was doing. Oh, he's just going to destroy the world. Well, then what? How do you define destroying the world? Were they going to be able to cross the sea? Were they going to go to Dorne? Like, what were they going to do? So ultimately, I think the problem that I have with a lot of fantasy is it doesn't have a lot of allegorical. Like, actually, that's not true either. I guess it's just the iconography. The iconography of fantasy doesn't work for me as much as science fiction does. But then again, you know what? Game of Thrones did. But Game of Thrones felt like you were watching history, not necessarily fantasy. Chris Parsons says, which is easier, Star Trek chess or speaking Klingon? Well, the thing about Star Trek chess is it's basically three-dimensional chess is kind of real, whereas Klingon is fake. Three-dimensional chess you can actually play. So you can get the rules and play it. But that's a good question. I mean, look, if you can speak Klingon, I think that's cool. But three-dimensional chess seems more tangible to me than learning how to speak Klingon as a language. CJ Dunn says, Rob, don't feel too bad. I've seen Sound of Music several times. My wife loves it. I don't like it. I fell asleep every time. Dude, the first time I watched Sound of Music, I fell asleep, but I was drinking heavily, to be honest. And that's why I fell asleep. But yeah. Mark C says, I saw Hobbs and Shaw. What if the disembodied voice of the director is Han? That would be pretty cool. I mean, look, if they just said Han was back, I would be like, I get it. Like, he didn't die in the fire, but he knew that somebody was gunning for him, so he had to fake his own death, get the hell out of there because he had friends that could help him, and bail because somebody was gunning for him. And he knew that. And once he knew that, he knew there was something bigger afoot. I'd love to see that. I would buy that in a minute. Justice for Han. Mm-hmm. Chief Demac says, holy crap, Rob, the other day you mentioned UFO the series. So I checked it out, and before I knew it, I binged the whole thing. I absolutely love it. Thanks again, Rob, and feel free to recommend more. Well, Jeff, I did a whole early Robservations, although the sound is bad. So I apologize. My microphone was not working quite well that day. I did a whole show about UFO. For those of you who do not know, I was talking about the Eagle from Space 1999. There is a great creator of genre television named Jerry Anderson. I'm sure a lot of people know who Jerry Anderson is, but in case you don't, he began making science fiction shows in the late 50s, and he began with super marionettes. And he made super marionette shows. His first were Supercar and Fireball XL5. And I think he made more, but those are the ones people know the most that you can get. Fireball XL5 was a science fiction show. Well, they both were, but Fireball XL5 took place on a spaceship, and Supercar was about a supercar, the titular supercar. And then, of course, he went on and did more shows like Stingray, which took place under the oceans. And then he, of course, did Thunderbirds, which is probably his most successful show, but International Rescue. Followed up Thunderbirds with Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, which is awesome. But his first live action show, which was made in between 1969 and 1971, was UFO. That ran 26 episodes. And UFO is about a super secret multinational organization, Shadow, SHADO, Supreme Headquarters Alien Defense Organization. And this is the series is set in 1980. So set a decade from which it was actually made. And the plot of the series is about Shadow's lonely secret war against alien invaders that have come. They're from a dying race that have come to steal human body parts to perpetuate their species or perpetuate. You never see what they really look like. You only ever see their human agents. But it was a very existential, surrealistic show, even though it had, it was pretty straightforward as well. But UFO is one of my favorite science fiction shows of all time. And it was going to go into a second season, but it was too expensive. And then it was retooled and became Space 1999, which is, of course, if you've never seen Space 1999, it was recently re-released on Blu-ray in this country by Shout. And Space 1999 is about Moonbase Alpha, the inhabitants of Moonbase Alpha, and as the result of a nuclear accident on the moon on September 13th, 1999, a nuclear explosion blows the moon out of Earth's orbit, and it traverses the universe. And the first season of Space 1999 is also very metaphysical. You can find every episode on YouTube. I love the first season of Space 1999. It was there is an overarching, in a way, it shares something in common with Battlestar Galactica, in that it's insinuated that there is a deity or some kind of uber intelligence that is sort of guiding humanity along, certainly in Galactica. But that was actually in Space 1999 first. And it's really interesting, especially when you watch the whole season and you get to the final episode, The Testament of Arcadia. I've been watching, I have the British Blu-ray set, but what happened is, unfortunately, the second season of Space 1999, they kept the Eagles, but Fred Freiberger, who produced the ill-fated third season of Star Trek, the original series, came on board Space 1999. They changed it around to get rid of the metaphysics because it was seen as being sort of dour and it wasn't as bright and fun. It wasn't as good for the kids. It just doesn't work. They really dumbed down. They had to put like a monster in every episode. But the first season of Space 1999, I really, really like a lot. And so I'm glad you watched it, Chef. And you got to check out Space 1999 if you haven't. And then, of course, Jerry Anderson went on. If you want to see a really interesting science fiction movie, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but Jerry Anderson made a really cool science fiction film. I want to say, let me check. I think it came out in 1969. But I'm going to find out. But he made a science fiction film with all the people that he made UFO with, called Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, or AKA, it was also called Doppelganger. But of course, they had to change the title in America because nobody knows what a doppelganger is here. I think it's 1969. Let me check. Let me make sure. Yes, it is. So Journey to the Far Side of the Sun came out in 1969. It's a science fiction film about a duplicate Earth. And it repeated some themes of various Twilight Zone episodes. Very interesting. But I really like the movie. I think it's a really good science fiction film. So if you haven't seen Space 1999, but you want to see a really interesting science fiction film from the late 60s, Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, a.k.a. Doppelganger. A lot of the crew that made UFO worked on that, or then went on to work on UFO in Space 1999. It's got some really great model work. And again, the kind of the surreal metaphysical aspects of UFO in the first season of Space 1999 sort of permeate through Journey to the Far Side of the Sun. It's just really interesting. It's a really cool movie. There's a lot of really great science fiction films, not just 2001 and Planet of the Apes, but in the late 60s, early 70s, there's a lot of really interesting movies. And you know what would make a great double bill, actually a great triple bill, because on Laserdisc, Colossus, the Foreman Project, and Silent Running, which are two early 70s Universal science fiction movies, were released. But if you want to watch a great triple bill, get Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, get Colossus, the Foreman Project, and get Silent Running. They are all available on Blu-ray. You can get them all on Blu-ray. I don't know where they are streaming, but that would make a great sci-fi triple bill from the early 70s. See where we were. And by the way, don't let Joan Baez singing a song at the beginning of the Silent Running put you off. CJ Dunn says, CJ, dude, did you get paid this week, man? First of all, I want to thank you for all the support today. You're very generous. Thank you so much. Rob, I just want to say I love what you're doing here. I love chatting with the Post-Geek Singularity. We need to do a get-together. We are, CJ, in London, in Leicester Square on April 3rd. No, I know. Look, if I can figure out a way to buy my movie back, Free Enterprise, and I can do a new Final Frontier cut of it, I will go on my Robservation Nation tour. I will drive across the country. I will. You know what I want to do? I'm obsessed with 7-Elevens, but that's a whole other story. I love 7-Elevens. I have a whole rating system in my mind for 7-Elevens. And I wanted to do a whole documentary, and I wanted to go to 7-Elevens in every one of our states, all the lower 48s, Alaska and Hawaii. But I really would love to spend like 2 months just driving all over the country. I could have set up theaters. I'd show Free Enterprise and lecture, and we'd have a live night, Robservation Nation. I don't know if it'd work. Like it'd have to be, the economics would have to be self-sustaining. Like I'd have to make enough money from ticket sales or something to keep me going to the next city, but it would be pretty cool. Maybe I'd call it the Almost Famous Tour because I love Almost Famous. CJ Dunn says, I'll go back to California for that. I adopted my son Dominic from Ventura County in Oxnard. My wife and I are planning a trip to go back to take our beloved son to see where he was born. To Oxnard, dude? Actually, there's a couple of good sports bars in Oxnard, but take him to Santa Barbara. Just lie. Take him a half an hour north and say he was born in Santa Barbara. Because that's what I would do. Oh, look who's here. Look who's here. Victory Unlimited show is here. Victory Unlimited when he is here. When the Victory Unlimited show is here, I feel like I have to talk like this. So, Victory Unlimited, welcome. By the way, the Victory Unlimited show always supports the channel. Thank you very much. Victory Unlimited says, Rob, as a child, I loved watching the old 60s spy movies. My favorites were Dean Martin's Matt Helm movies with names like The Wrecking Crew, The Silencers, etc. Laugh out loud. What old school genre movies have you rewatched lately? Well, that's a great, actually, Victory Unlimited show. That is a very good question to ask. There are a lot of great, in the wake of the James Bond movies, there were a lot of like the Matt Helm films with Dean Martin. The Wrecking Crew is probably the best. The Wrecking Crew, of course, which has now been popularized in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Tarantino film. But, there was 4 Matt Helm movies, I think. 4. The Wrecking Crew and The Silencers were 2 of them. It's not a great movie, but Modesty Blaze is another movie from the 60s I like. Of course, I adore John Philip Law's Diabolic and Mario Bava's Danger Diabolic. By the way, Mystery Science Theater 3000 made fun of Diabolic, which they shouldn't have, just like they shouldn't have made fun of Star Crash or This Island Earth. I understand where they're coming from. They shouldn't have done it. Anyway, but Modesty Blaze. And I'll tell you another old school genre film that you all need to watch. I've said this before on the show, but there's more subscribers now and more people who haven't heard me say it. The Franco-Italian co-production Wild Wild Planet. I think from 1965. I think it's from 1965. Let me see if it's from 1965. Hold, please. If you guys haven't seen Wild Wild Planet, after the show, or just go Wild 66. Wild Wild Planet 66. One day I'm going to own an Italian 4-sheet of Wild Wild Planet. If you haven't seen Wild Wild Planet, go watch the trailer because it is peak. There's no verisimilitude there, but it is peak cheesy mid-60s sci-fi. I mean, it is. First of all, I actually really like Wild Wild Planet. It's hard to get people that have grown up in a post-Star Wars alien world to find anything of value in Wild Wild Planet. But man, Wild Wild Planet, you can see, you'll watch Wild Wild Planet Victory Unlimited and you'll be like, oh, okay, now I understand like why he loves movies like Star Crash. If you watch the Wild Wild Planet trailer and you're like, oh, I want to see that, we park our shuttlecrafts in the same garage or in the same shuttle bay. CJ Dunn says, just so we're clear, Rob, we're not going to name our next kid Han. We're going to name a boy Raylan, or Rylan. It's Raylan. Raylan after the Elmore Leonard character, and if it's a girl, Adriana after the Victoria's Secret model. You know what? Cheers to that, CJ. Pin Drop is here. Pin Drop says, the cosplay videos were fun. For those of you who don't know, the first episode of Robservations, when I thought I was going to make a documentary show, when I realized it would take me 3 months to do each episode and nobody would watch them, Greg Smith, our moderator, one of my old friends, he and I grew up together. I took, because I'm trying to make a bunch of short videos and things people can watch that aren't necessarily live. So I'm repurposing some old stuff. I'm going to put things out that no one has ever seen before. I'm going through my archives. It's all part of expanding the channel and trying to make it bigger. Greg Smith, my first episode of Robservations, I go to his house, and he showed us three things. He showed us how he cosplayed or created his 501st Legion approved Boba Fett costume, his Resistance flight suit from X-Wing flight suit from The Force Awakens, and also his 1-to-1 scale land speeder, which I'm going to drop later today. So I made little videos, the Boba Fett videos, 15 minutes, the Resistance X-Wing pilot suit is 5 minutes. And I thought they were cool videos, and people seem to be digging them. You know, and one of the things, again, what people have been saying, and I got a few emails to this effect too, is how they're positive. They're celebrating fandom. And I figured what I'm going to do is I just want to talk about cool stuff that I love, you know, that I have. And I figure an Eagle transporter would be fun because I have blueprints of the Eagle transporter. I've got the Moonbase Alpha technical manual that was published by Starlog magazine back in the 70s. And I have a number of Eagles that I've bought over the years, and Eagles that I wish I could reacquire. Like the Mattel Toys Eagle that they made in 76, still one of the greatest childhood toys ever. Very difficult to get one in a box or in great shape. And then I've, of course, got the 1/48 scale Eagle, the deluxe Eagle model that it's been sitting right here. It's sitting here. That you can't see it anymore, but you used to be able to see it behind me in all my chats, which I'm going to build soon, actually. I'm getting ready. I want to build it. There's secondary market parts I've had to slowly acquire, but I'm getting ready to build it. So yeah, so thank you for liking the cosplay videos. Look out for more of that. If you like those kinds of videos and you like the small, pass them along, share them, like them. It helps the YouTube analytics. So Will Yang says, I only go to 7-Eleven for Slurpees. Do you drink them? I've been drinking Slurpees since I was a little kid. One of the great things that 7-Eleven used to have when I was growing up, when I was a kid, they used to have Slurpee cups. You get these plastic, like pint glass cups that you get Slurpees in. They were plastic, but they had superheroes on them. Like there was a whole DC pantheon of cups. So you'd get I had many, many cups. I've always loved Slurpees. I still am a fiend for cola Slurpees. I've always loved cola Slurpees. I don't know why. Maybe it goes back to being a little kid, but I do love Slurpees. But I like a lot of stuff at 7-Eleven. There's a lot of reasons I like 7-Eleven. And I'll tell you a funny story. I've told the story before. All my stories, you guys must be tired of hearing them. But I'll tell you, like, I like 7-Eleven coffee. Flat out say it. It might not be as good as Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks or whatever, but I like the condiments. When you go to 7-Eleven and you get 7-Eleven coffee, there's something about it. Well, a couple of years ago, they started putting their morning coffee in thermoses, those big thermos jugs that you had to pump. And I didn't like that as much. Now, there was a 7-Eleven on Hollywood Way, which is right down the street from Warner Brothers. And it's right down. There's a 7-Eleven. I want to say is it on Verdugo? I think it's on Verdugo, on the corner of Verdugo and Hollywood Way. I think so. And I was editing at Kappa Studios. I was editing at Kappa, which is right down the street. And there's right across from Porto's Bakery. I would stop at the 7-Eleven every morning before I went to edit. I was working on the movie. It's on Netflix. It's a science fiction movie called Paradox, not the Western thing, but it's called Paradox. It's a time travel thriller that I edited. It's on Netflix. You can see it. Look, it was made for $250,000. It's very cheap, but I'm very proud of the last 20 minutes of the editorial work. And the movie stars Zoe Bell, who's actually in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and has worked for Quentin Tarantino. She starred in his Death Proof. She also stars in Paradox. But I was editing Paradox, and I would go into the 7-Eleven every morning and get their coffee. And it was really good. Like, as far as 7-Eleven, like, I've got a whole rating system in my own mind. When I go into 7-Eleven, there's these things I look around and go, okay, I'll give you an 8. But so the 7-Eleven coffee at this particular 7-Eleven got a 10 from me. And finally, the manager was there one day, and I said, hey, is the manager here? And he was there. He was actually behind the counter. He goes, well, I'm the manager. I said, I got to tell you, dude, I love your 7-Eleven coffee. I'm like a 7-Eleven coffee connoisseur. I'm like, what is your secret? And he goes, I'll tell you what my secret is. My secret is I make new coffee every 10 minutes. And I was like, oh, he's like, yeah, I don't. And he didn't have the pump thermos things. He's like, I'm not going to get those. I want my coffee pots, and I make fresh coffee. At this 7-Eleven, we have fresh coffee, get new pots every 10 minutes. Now, I don't know if this is a good thing or not, I don't, for his business, but I knew it was good for me as a coffee drinker. So what was awesome is, not awesome, this really happened. So when you walked out the door of this particular 7-Eleven, it said, if you want to have comments about the 7-Eleven franchise or whatever, please call this number. So I did. I called up the number, and I wanted to call their corporate office and say, now this 7-Eleven is exemplary. This is a fine example of 7-Elevens, and you should be very proud of this 7-Eleven franchise owner. So I did. I called up the 7-Eleven place, and I got this woman on the phone, and they bounced me around, and she's like, well, what's the problem? I'm like, no, there's no problem. She couldn't understand that I was calling to pay a compliment to a 7-Eleven and not have something bad to say. And I finally got her to understand what I was doing. I'm like, no, I'm calling. This is a customer service call, but I'm you're supposed to. It just said comment. It didn't say, make bad comments or good comments. It said to make. I figured it would be one or the other, like Yelp reviews or something. And I'm like, no, this 7-Eleven rules, and I love this 7-Eleven. And I tried to explain, and I told them about how I talked to the manager, and they had made new coffee for 10 minutes. And this girl's like, who is this guy? Like, what is he saying? Clearly, I must have had a screw loose. And I might very well have a screw loose, but I do love 7-Eleven coffee. And at the end, they said, wow, they were very happy. And the woman said, we'll send you something. We'll send you a free gift. So I gave my address. I didn't think anything of it. And like 6 weeks later, I did get an envelope full for not full. Like I got like 2 or 3 coupons for 3 cups of coffee for free. So there you go. If you like 7-Eleven and you call in, and as a matter of fact, if you guys go to 7-Eleven, start looking around, check them out. Look at their bananas. Do they have good bananas? 7-Elevens, they used to have like discount Blu-rays and DVDs. This was the best. Like I would go find like there were movies. Like I used to buy when I had my Elantra, my Hyundai Elantra, I would buy movies at 7-Eleven, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. They were mostly like MGM films, but they would be Blu-rays that were cheap, like $4.99. And I would buy Blu-rays of movies that like, ooh, look at this, the Man with No Name trilogy or something. And I would buy movies that I thought were classic films that a lot of people might not have seen. So whenever they were in my car, I would be like, hey, do you have a Blu-ray player? Have you ever seen To Live and Die in L.A.? I'd be like, here, I would like you to have a fabulous parting gift. And I would give away Blu-rays. No, I didn't buy DVDs, but Blu-rays of movies to people. And I had bought them at 7-Elevens. Now, I don't even know if they do that anymore because where I live now, there isn't a 7-Eleven that I go to. But this was 3 years ago, 3 and 4. My peak 7-Eleven was 2 and 3 or 4 years ago. That's when I was going to 7-Eleven like every day. And anyway, that's a real weird digression about that. But yes, well, people are like, what is this show about? CG Dunn says, laugh out loud, Rob. I can't lie to my son, dude. Integrity is a virtue, bro. I know, I'm just kidding. I'm just saying Oxnard. I mean, there's a lot of goodness in Oxnard, and Oxnard is close to, of course, Ventura, which is close to Ojai. It's still close. The whole area is it can be quite beautiful, and you're very close to the coastline. I'm sure your son will be quite happy to know he came from that area. It's beautiful. It's beautiful country. Beautiful country. It really is. Chef DeMax says, best double feature I ever saw, Star Crash and Laser Blast at the New Beverly Cinema while I was traveling with Kim Milford. Okay. Charlie Band, my old boss, produced Laser Blast. If you guys haven't seen Laser Blast, I mean, it's been ripped off, but it was made post Star Wars. It's literally about these awesome stop motion aliens that come to Earth, like hunting a fugitive, and they accidentally leave a giant laser weapon behind, which is found by an actor, I think his name's Kim Milford, who also, little known fact, the lead of Laser Blast plays the villain in Corvette Summer. which of course Elizabeth and I just watched because Warner Premiere released it. Not Warner Premiere, Warner Archive released it on Blu-ray. Beautiful Blu-ray. If you guys haven't seen Corvette Summer, it's a great coming-of-age tale with, of course, Matthew Robbins directed it, and Hal Barwood and Matthew Robbins. I think they went on to make Dragon Slayer. But they made, by the way, Dragon Slayer. If you guys haven't seen Dragon Slayer is not out on physical media. Paramount has done a beautiful restoration of Dragon Slayer, which is on Amazon streaming. Check it out in widescreen. It's not available on physical media. I don't know why. Dragon Slayer came out in 81. I want to say 81. Check it out if you like Dragon. It still has, I think, the greatest dragon ever put on screen. The Go Motion Vermithrax Pejorative. That's the name of the dragon. And it was done by ILM post Empire Strikes Back, where they started really playing with Go Motion. And what Go Motion was it was stop motion animation, but they had figured out how to add motion blur in between frames. So instead of going like what stop motion did, it looked much more fluid and realistic because they had added that motion blur. And that's what Go Motion was. But the Vermithrax Pejorative was a Go Motion dragon, very cool dragon, and you can see it on, if you watch the movie. If you haven't seen Dragon Slayer, it's not the most riveting film in the world, but it's a really good film. It's really aged well. Check it out. But Star Crash and Laser Blast at the New Beverly. For those of you who don't know, the New Beverly is a movie theater here in Los Angeles. It's a repertory theater. It is owned by Quentin Tarantino, and they play a lot of his 35 millimeter prints at that theater. It's recently been renovated. They show some great stuff there, and I would love to have seen Star Crash and Laser Blast. What a great, both 78, I think. 78? Yeah. CJ Dunn says, Rob, you're going to love this. About to watch King of the Monsters with the family. I hope you're watching it on Blu-ray or in HD. I hope you're playing it loud because I don't care what anybody says. I love Mike Dougherty's Godzilla King of the Monsters. I do not have the disc yet. I will pick it up, but I don't have it. I can only get disc one. By the way, you guys don't know this, and these are first world problems. The Rollerball disc. For those of you who don't know, I ordered Rollerball, Norman Jewison's 1975 Rollerball from Amazon UK. I've never had a problem with anything I've ever bought from Amazon UK, ever. I got my Rollerball Blu-ray. It was bent in half. The package was bent in half. The disc was bent in half. Everything was bent in half. So you get a refund. So I refunded it, and I was also getting, at the same time, the 4-disc Studio Canal, The Doors, The Final Cut, Oliver Stone's The Doors, The Final Cut disc. They were going to be coming together, and apparently the package was lost. I recently got an email. I've been waiting for it. I'm like, where is this disc? It says it was going to be delivered. Then it said it was going to be late. Then Amazon sends me a notice saying, sorry, the package has been lost. We're refunding your money. I'm like, I don't want the money. I want the discs. I want the Rollerball. I want the Arrow Rollerball disc, and I want the 4-disc Canal Plus, because I'm getting their 4-disc Canal Plus sets, Canal Plus Studio Canal. I wanted that 4-disc The Doors Final Cut. It's come out in America too, but they've done cool stuff. They did Deer Hunter. They did 4 Carpenter films. They did Kind Hearts and Coronets. I don't know what the deal is. But anyway, let's see. I'm going to go back to the letters. I've been remiss. What was the last one I read? Was Jim's letter. This is another one, somebody that Jeffrey Mao. Jeffrey Mao has been writing letters to me. He's become a very vocal and member of the Post-Geek Singularity community. I've enjoyed his letters. So I'm going to read another one. I really like this letter. It's very interesting. It responds to what I was talking about earlier. Could Star Trek ever have the same success as the Marvel Cinematic Universe? A couple days ago. And so this is Jeffrey Mao. He writes about this subject. Oh, hi, King Robert, the notoriously sanctimonious of the House Burnett, first and only of his name, Dark Lord of verisimilitude, lover of Star Trek, and hater of discovery. Hear my words, for thou speakest the truth about the folly of a Star Trek shared universe, a la the MCU. I was listening to yesterday's podcast about the news of the CBS Viacom merger and the now giddy possibilities for the future of Star Trek, and like you, I found it a steaming load of horse manure. And I would like to know what they are smoking because it must be damn good. In accordance with your own axiom, characters and story must always be put in front of your universe. Unfortunately, the only way they can make anything work is by doing the exact opposite. They're going to take the universe and take bits and pieces from it, different concepts, and make a series out of it. Basically, they will be attempting to manufacture a shared universe as opposed to adapting an existing one like the Marvel Comics universe. That's actually a very good point. The one key point that they're missing is that the MCU is adapted from the original Marvel universe. There are already decades of materials, hundreds of characters, large and small, thousands upon thousands of published pages of comic book material. Feige and his crew have been able to take the very best ideas and concepts and characters from the books and use what they wanted and discard what they didn't, and also selectively and cleverly introduce their own twists on the canon and the characters. When they diverged from comic canon, they did it in ways that worked. Sure, Red Skull never led Hydra during World War II, and it wasn't the science arm of the Third Reich, but it worked. I will include Star Wars into the discussion here because Star Wars, like Star Trek, is an original IP that was created by one man and then shepherded through their initial run by that man and a group of enthusiasts. Both grew in popularity over the years, but as the original creators and architects left and corporate interests took over, it could be argued the product became more and more diluted, especially because the original characters that everyone first fell in love with were either pushed out, retired, died, or are otherwise no longer involved like before. You probably know where I'm going with this, Rob. Star Wars has often been compared to the MCU because they are both owned by Disney. I have never agreed with this comparison because they are not the same product. Star Wars cannot sustain 3 films a year because they simply don't have the material or the characters to make it happen. The MCU does in spades. It could produce 6 films a year, but now they are smartly sending some of that product to Disney Plus, where the format allows for better storytelling and lesser exposure to a poorer than normal box office. It may surprise people to realize this, but despite Star Wars and Star Trek having very expansive universes and canon built up over decades with dozens upon dozens of books and other supporting materials, they are really quite thin at the top in terms of their characters, the core ones that we all love. If we are to stick with your axiom, the reason why Star Trek and Star Wars do not hold the same place in the hearts of us now is simply due to the old characters leaving, mostly necessarily due to old age, and not having been replaced with as good or better characters. Interestingly enough, the MCU is in a somewhat similar boat now, with Iron Man and Captain America no longer either alive or active. It will remain to be seen if the MCU has done a better job at passing the torch or not. But I feel their bench is far more stocked than either Star Wars or Star Trek. With Star Trek, the torch was passed from the original series crew to the next generation crew pretty well, for the most part. But there was no similar passing from then on. It is pretty obvious that Star Wars has not done that passing anywhere near as well, and that after the next passing will occur for sooner than was probably expected. After the Berman series ended, Star Trek went into the past on both TV and film, and it now appears that Star Wars will do the same. So when we hear that Star Wars is going to possibly do an Old Republic series next, well, the geeks know about it, but for the normies, the main question remains: who are the characters? None of this works without them. You can talk about Dan and Dave all you want. The normies don't know them. They know the characters. See you in the Singularity, Jeffrey Mao. Jeff, really liked your letter, and I agree 100%. Again, I think you're absolutely right. The great thing about the MCU is they're drawing upon the rich legacy of the comic characters. There's literally thousands of characters. Look, you could even take a character from the MCU like Devil Dinosaur and make him work. I mean, they're making a Morbius, the living vampire movie over at Sony with Jared Leto. It's incredible what they're able to do if they want to do it. Now, I think you're absolutely right. Look, what Star Trek did, what Gene Roddenberry did, it's amazing to me how this was not looked at before. What did Roddenberry do? He came back, and when they did Next Generation, he took everything into the future and made new characters. that were recognizable Star Trek tropes. You understood they were Star Trek characters. They had, Data took the place of Spock. You had doctors, but you had new characters. Deanna Troi as a counselor, and it was different. And then when Gene Roddenberry passed away, and then when you had Jerry Taylor and Rick Berman and Michael Piller creating things like Deep Space Nine, and then on to Voyager, and then Brandon Braga and Berman creating, well, Enterprise was different, but for Deep Space Nine and Voyager, they continued to move ahead. The problem with Voyager is, like you pointed out, they ran out of characters. They ran out of tropes. Voyager is an amalgamation of Star Trek tropes, and they didn't do enough to reinvent those characters. I think they were too scared, maybe. They were locked in. And with Discovery, what Brian Fuller was going to go back and do, remember that the real problem that I have with Discovery is you had a visionary who used to work on Star Trek. They actually had somebody in Brian Fuller that had worked on Berman-era Star Trek, under that era, was a big Star Trek fan, cut his teeth on Deep Space Nine, was integral to the later seasons of Voyager, who had taken another mythology in the Hannibal Lecter books from Thomas Harris and reinvented those books. And he was doing what he was doing, and Brian Fuller we're friendly. I mean, I don't know him. I don't like go out and drink with him, but we've been friendly over the years, and we've talked over the years, and he's trusted me with a lot of material. And I really like speaking with him. And I've learned a lot from him, and especially his book. Like, I have a book here. It's right here. I'm going to get it. If you want a great book on the making of television and to see how much television can be an auteurist vision, even though it's a producer's medium, not a director's medium, this book is incredible. And I love the back, Eat the Rude. I'm bummed out that I like my books in mint condition, but I got bunged on the corner there. This book is incredible. And if you read this book, it shows how much detail. It's like, if you're going to hire Brian Fuller to do a TV series and you read this book, you're like, that's what you're getting. That's what we would have had with Star Trek. And his conception of setting of Discovery in the time it was set, and what he wanted to do, the way Saru looked, the costumes, he was really going for, it was very different. But he was a Star Trek fan. But I think what Jeffrey was saying is, he's absolutely right. They did not create new characters. And yeah, Discovery did do that. But again, I don't feel, I feel people love Discovery's characters despite the characters themselves. And I think shows like The Mandalorian, and even Solo created a bunch of new characters. The Mandalorian is going to be the true test. Can we look at can we see Star Wars characters outside of the Skywalker saga? I mean, we can, if you've read the EU books and you read the comics and all that. I think they can. I think it's going to be really interesting. But if The Mandalorian works, and I suspect it will, if The Mandalorian works, it's going to be a course correction for Star Wars. And I think it's a good thing. The Star Wars universe is incredibly rich, and I mean, the possibilities are endless. So I'm very excited about The Mandalorian, but you're absolutely right. And I think the problem is what they're doing with Star Trek now is they're taking their cues from everything else. They're like, ooh, let's make it like Guardians of the Galaxy, or let's make it like Firefly, or let's do it like this, or let's do it like that. And they're not going back to the core principles. All Star Trek characters that you're creating should come out of the Star Trek franchise as a whole. I mean, there's the Vanguard series. Peter David did the New Frontiers series. There's things that have been done in the novels that are analogous to that already, that have worked like gangbusters. The Vanguard series of Star Trek novels is terrific. I really liked what Peter David did with his New Frontier series of books. He wrote like 15 of them or something. And what's amazing is these things exist, and yet no one's going back and looking at them. Star Trek Discovery ultimately is a bastardization of what the original creator of the show came up with, and everybody was trying to make it their own, but they lacked that love or their previous Star Trek experience. And you bring in the only person on there, Kirsten Beyer, who is a great Star Trek novelist, I know for a fact, her voice was marginalized. she was brought in as like, see, look, we've got somebody who knows the canon. But you know what? The last thing television writers want to do is listen to some novelist that's going to tell them about the show that they're writing. That's just not how it works. TV writers are a singular bunch, and the last thing they want to do is be beholden to novels that somebody else wrote that they had nothing to do with. And, you know, unless you love the shows. But that's what Brian Fuller had done. He took Thomas Harris's Hannibal Lecter novels and he reinvented them, but there was always a love and a loyalty towards the original material. But he rejiggered it and changed it around in such a way that it was still good. What he did was really interesting, and I really, really liked it, and I wanted to see that brought to Star Trek. But Jeffrey, you're absolutely right. I think that it was definitely missing. So CJ Dunn says, Rob, I'd love to discuss more with you about Dom. How do I DM you? Well, you can DM me on Twitter, you know, and if you DM me on Twitter, send me a request. It's always at Burnett RM. Find me on Twitter, or you can, you know, just send me an email direct. Say you want this to go to direct me and send it to the Burnettwork. Go to the Burnettwork website, theburnettwork.net. You can always send me a personal email there. Just mark it personal in the subject heading, and it'll go to me. And CJ Dunn says, cheers, Rob, and my family, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Well, thank you, CJ. Thank you for supporting the channel. That's very nice of you. And Jeffrey, that was a great letter. Oh, here's okay. There's so many letters. There's so many letters. Here's another. I got to read this letter just because, you know, it's you'll see why I'm gonna read it. I've got to read it because, of course, tomorrow's the Fathom event about Star Trek: The Motion Picture. This letter comes from Pete. Pete, greetings again, Rob. This is Pete from the UK, beaming into your letters once again. Thank you for reading out my previous letter. I got a real kick watching the notorious RMB recounting my geek trek. I intended that letter as a one-off, but I'm now tempted to do a follow-up as I'm really curious about something regarding yourself. This will hopefully be a more condensed Wrath of Khan style letter to my long The Motion Picture original letter, and it's actually on that note that I write to you now as I'm really interested about your appreciation for Star Trek: The Motion Picture. In almost every Robservations video, you proclaim Star Trek: The Motion Picture to be your absolute favorite Star Trek movie, above even Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. I totally get it, as there must be many original Trek fans who grew up with Star Trek, the original series in the 60s and 70s, who love the motion picture and consider it their favorite Star Trek movie. There was a build-up to it being not only the first live-action Trek in 10 years, but in the form of a no-expenses-spared movie directed by Robert Wise, the only time so far that a Trek movie has had a true A-list director, and is a rich, intricate movie detailing all kinds of stuff you've talked about before, and I don't need to reiterate it here. However, growing up as a Star Trek fan in the 80s and 90s, I can recall virtually every piece in every sci-fi or Star Trek book or magazine, or the letters pages of the official Star Trek magazine. They would call Star Trek: The Motion Picture out as the worst Star Trek movie until Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. It is often referred to as Star Trek: The Slow Motion Picture or Star Trek: The Motionless Picture, etc., as per reviews at the time in the 70s. Critics would bring up the pajama uniforms, the dull gray of the sets, the over-serious performances, no humor, etc.